We've already seen the death of the Justice League, and this week we got Justice League Road to Dark Crisis, which I think is supposed to get you excited as we're ending Shadow War and going into the next big event. I don't know that this exactly hit the mark, and here to talk to me about that is the man that knows DC better than anybody, Josh McDonald. How you doing, Josh?
I am okay, Wes. I wish I could say I were excited about this, but I'm not. So, yeah, there we go. Well, how about an intro?
Justice League 75, the death of the Justice League. While the deaths weren't impactful, it was pretty well put together. The art was solid and everything. So it wasn't like, well, it was just a bad comic book. And this is the next thing that we've gotten that has Dark Crisis on it, kind of leading us into this. And this thing is just done really poorly. I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to show that the heroes in the DC Comics universe are emotionally impacted by the deaths of the Justice League, and they're kind of scattered around. And there's a little bit of throw in of, some villains are coming back because they see it as an opportunity. But these stories needed to be twisted into the mainline heroes, like the ongoing titles, with an actual story around it, rather than just highlighting a couple of key moments here or there, because it comes off as really boring.
It's incredibly boring. And, I think you mentioned earlier, Justice League didn't carry the death of the Justice League didn't carry much emotional weight. And I think you're seeing that times 10 here. And part of it is how they decided to structure these stories. I think the idea of what they're doing is a good idea. Show that these heroes are trying to cope with what happened and figure things out and go. But they try to cram it into like a 6 or 7 page story. And it's just not enough room for it to breathe. Whereas if you let this happen in the main line, in an actual story arc, whether it's 3 issues or 6 issues, whatever that story needs, it would play much better. It would feel like it had more stakes. You could carry more of an emotional weight, and you could actually, I was about to say you could add in some nuances, but we know writers today can't write with nuance. So scratch that. But it would let you set this up a lot better than just saying like, hey, you know what? We want to show that these heroes are kind of struggling to cope with this. Go write a quick story and just kind of like make something happen and let them reference it. Because that's what this book feels like.
Yeah, this is just the wrong place for it. Something that's called Justice League Road to Dark Crisis really should have had some big reveals. Like, how did we get here? What really happened to the Justice League? Is there any hope for the Justice League and stuff like that? And that is completely absent, other than one story that gives you some information on Pariah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I don't want to say it was a great story, but it was by far the best story out of the collection. And honestly, not much happens. It hits the emotional weight that you needed. I want to touch on something because you mentioned it doesn't explain how we got here. And I feel like that's the one of the biggest flaws of this book is it doesn't kind of like recap you or refresh you. I don't want the whole issue to do it, but just kind of like remind you of the steps we've taken. Because if you go back all the way to the beginning of Infinite Frontier, that's when they first started planting seeds for this happening. And I'm not going to say that they've done well in having all this unfold, but if you kind of highlighted the high points of what's gone on, it would have also kind of built up some excitement or ramped up some momentum. And it failed to do that, completely failed to do that.
Yeah, I would say this is an enormous failure, especially at $6. Like that is a high price tag for almost nothing of substance whatsoever. The first story that we do get is Josh Williamson, the architect of Dark Crisis for DC Comics. Dan Jurgens on art. Likes to see him come back and doing some interior work. It's called Team Up, and this thing just kind of turned me off. It's probably the best constructed story, but I am tired of them trying to make John Kent and Dick Grayson a thing. John Kent and Damian Wayne is a thing. John Kent and Dick Grayson just aren't, and they're trying to force it together, and they do a lot of symbolism to let you know that this is the new Superman and Batman relationship that you should buy into, but people already bought into that relationship, and it isn't this one.
I did not care for this story. I do think structurally it's probably the best story. I agree with you there. But yeah, you've had 2 instances. Well, we'll say 2 instances, one recent and one current of a better quote unquote world's finest. And that's Super Sons, which was Damian and John. And Damian and John have always been tied together. So it feels weird to try to force them out of that. And then Bruce and Clark. And we have, World's Finest book right now with Bruce and Clark. That's just, Mark Waid's knocking it out of the park. So when you take both of those and then look at this just completely pales in comparison. There's no logistical reason. Like they try to show you why these two would get along and be kind of like brothers in arms. and it just doesn't work. They're on two different levels, and I don't mean that in capability, just where they are and how they are as heroes. They're just at two different points in their life. So it does not work for me one bit.
And probably the biggest sin of this comic book, or this story in particular, is the incessant reminder to tell you that Superman's already died and he came back, and Batman already died and he came back, and there's nothing to worry about. The Justice League dying meant nothing. The characters tell you that. As the reader, I was shocked.
Yeah, it's like one of those things that it's so self-aware of itself and not in a good way. And it almost felt like Josh Williamson felt like he needed to do this, and maybe it's because, we've heard that he didn't get much support from editorial. Maybe that's his way of being like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, everyone knows they're coming back. Fine. I'm going to write this in here, and I'm going to try to twist this to make it about, like, how their absence in general, whether it's short-term or long-term, can still carry some weight. And it's like, you know what? I kind of see what you're going for. And the moment I started to just kind of give you a pass for it, you then have John say, yeah, but some people don't return, right? And then you show an image of like Alfred and then Dick's parents. And I'm like, okay, well, one, let's see how long this lasts, because I promise you Alfred will come back. And two, I'm sure within the next 25 years, Dick's parents will be revealed to be alive. So at that point, it's just a pile of dog poop. Just flush it down the toilet.
Yeah, not well executed, but it is better than Life of Purpose from Jeremy Adams, Rosie Kemp. I expected more out of this. It's a Flash story. Jeremy Adams is the writer for Flash. He's done a great job with Wally West and the West family. We know that Barry Allen's lost. Apparently, Iris finally admits that she's lost Barry Allen now that the Justice League are dead. And we have, I guess, Wally taking out Wallace to get his mind off of it. And they're going to go and fight Giganta and do whack-a-mole. It was so... I don't even know what it was.
Stupid. It was so stupid. Okay, first off, I just want to say the art I was not a fan of. And Rosie Campy, I think, was the artist. I thought it was terrible. Just the forms were weird. The backgrounds half the time were just a solid splash color. It just seemed lazy. Yeah, considering there's supposed to be so much of a weight and we're supposed to be dealing with the league being gone and they have lines here, so much of the story is about like, oh, I just want to make you smile, and oh, look, we can have fun, and oh, look, and I'm like, I get it, I understand, but it wasn't done well. And the whole whack-a-mole bit made no sense to me, because if you've played whack-a-mole, it's like where the things pop up and you have to hit them. And this is like you have a giant Giganta here, and they're like whack-a-mole, but they're saving like a cat from a tree and taking an old lady out of the street. It's not whack-a-mole. It was just, it was really corny. It was super corny.
It was more like pinball or something.
Yeah, like I feel like Jeremy just didn't care, and he was like, "Whatever, I'll do this," and just put it out, because his Flash is really good, and this was not good.
Now, the third story, this is from Chuck Brown and Fico Osio. I think this one looks the best. I thought this was the best illustrated. It's called Survivors, but also it worries me the most. We see Hal Jordan out in space. He's calling in for some backup from the Justice League. No one's answering the call. As this alien ends up plunging into the ocean, you realize it must be on Earth because it's heading towards Atlantis. Then we see Jackson Hyde come out, and he kind of aids Hal Jordan, and they talk back and forth. There's a moment where I guess they solve the problem because it's a parasite, and he spins him around with centripetal force. Even by comic book standards, this was really stupid. But I am so scared that DC Comics are going to try and make Hal Jordan and Jackson Hyde a thing.
I do think they're going to try to make them a thing. I also agree that this story looks the best. The artwork was really good. They're there and they're trying to figure things out, like trying to figure out how to stop this alien. And it's a giant alien at first. And then when it hits the water, it breaks into like multiple smaller aliens. They suddenly realize that it's a parasite. They don't know how. And then Jackson Hyde's like, oh, I know what to do. Centripetal force. Don't ask me how I know, but I know.
Make a centrifuge.
Yeah.
Spin them.
Yeah, but he literally says, don't ask me how I know, but I know. And I'm like, if that is not the laziest fucking writing that I've ever seen.
That's some VAIL shit.
Oh, my God. It was so bad. And then aside from that, can we talk about, so Hal Jordan does not know the Justice League is dead. And then you have Jackson Hyde tell him. There is no reaction at all. No, like, nothing. It's just like, all right, cool. Carry on. And then at the end, he's like, I'm going to go see if I can figure out what happened to the Justice League, and then flies away. I'm like, with one of the alien parasites, by the way. I don't know if you caught that. So now I'm worried that he's going to show up again too.
It would have been more impactful if he would have said bummer.
Oh yeah, no, that's, you know what? That's the direction we should take Hal Jordan moving forward, is stoner Hal Jordan. Bummer,
it's like
man.
Spicoli from fucking Fast Times. Yeah. Yeah, that was easily the worst story. I'm so scared that they're going to try and make those two a team up thing. The fourth story is the Pariah story. Philip Kennedy Johnson, Layla Del Duca. I think they probably could have put a better artist on this one. But we do see what happens to Pariah after he loses his family after a crisis on Infinite Earths. And I guess they're coming back to haunt him, but really it's the Great Darkness kind of using their memory against him to try and build this machine that he doesn't want to do. But by the end, he's kind of succumbed.
I feel like if anything does a good job of setting up Dark Crisis, it's this story. And it's so understated that it can easily be overlooked. And when I say understated, I think the story's understated. I think the actual writing's understated. I even think the art is understated, but I think they're all excellent. And this does a nice job of not making Pariah just completely evil, but showing that he is being consumed and that he's kind of coerced into thinking he's going to save his family. I like it. Is it wonderful? No, but it does the job. And if anything here makes me interested to read what's going to happen next, it is this story. Whether or not they're going to lay into this or not, that remains to be seen. I should also say this is Philip Kennedy Johnson's story, so it should come as no surprise that it's solid.
It certainly is the only one that felt like really the road to Dark Crisis, other than the next one, I guess. We do know that the villains are rising up across the earth, and they gave Stephanie Phillips, for reasons I don't know, the task of kind of demonstrating that in this Because the Night story with Clayton Henry on art. And it's Stephanie Brown tracking down this villain who's going to steal, I think, some Egyptian artifacts or something. And then they just sass-mouth each other before she leaves. And then it's revealed that Firefly has shown up and there's like an entire legion of villains that she's falling in with.
Yeah, so the villain is Nocturna, and if you've read Batman, I believe it was in like the late 70s, she had a nice little like run in Batman comics where she was a villain, like potential love interest, she's a vampire, there's all these things going on. I think my biggest problem with this is the last time we saw Nocturna, I think it was in Suicide Squad, and she was kind of like shifting out of being a villain, not necessarily be a good guy, just not being a villain. And this kind of throws her right back into being a villain. But the story is just so weird. Like, she's trying to steal something from a museum, and it has something to do with the stars, and human bodies are made from stars. It was just some really weird shit. Stephanie Phillips at her finest, and it still sucks. Like, just Stephanie confronts her, and it's this whole back and forth about you're not even a sidekick. You're just I don't remember what she calls her.
You're an afterthought or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a weird exchange. And then Stephanie's like, yeah, well, what are your feelings about Batman? Everything is just so out of left field that it makes no sense whatsoever. So this was actually my least favorite story, but
I really like Hal Jordan. And the thought of Hal Jordan being placed with Jackson Hyde just freaks me out. I'm with you though, because the night was awful. If you like Stephanie Brown, I think you're going to be very disappointed on this. She gets spotlighted in the worst way possible. They spotlight everything uninteresting and everything that you could think was bad about the character. The villain told her to her face, and she never really rebuts.
No, not at all. And that's what's sad. She just like takes it and she's like, I
am the lamest member of the Batman family.
I am. Absolutely. Yeah, I will say my one hope overall, I know you're concerned with Green Lantern and Jackson Hyde, and I will say if they do decide to team them up, I'm okay with it, but they need to make sure that Hal is leading the show, not Jackson. And unfortunately, we know they're going to make Jackson lead the show. But if they're listening and they do this right, if you put Hal in like the leadership position between the two, it could be okay. But
this is what's going to happen. Hal's going to die. Jackson is going to join the Justice League, and he's going to fight the Great Darkness in Hal Jordan's memory. And I'm going to throw up in my mouth that it's not.
Oh my God, you're so right.
Jessica Cruz or Simon Baz or someone that actually knows the character.
Oh man, this is going to.
Hal Jordan gave me this ring, and I'm going to be like,
no. Yeah.
It's going to be bad. If this is the road to Dark Crisis, and this is the best they can put out to get you excited or make the death of the Justice League feel important, it's not a good start. It does
No.
not portend good things for Dark Crisis. I already had an uneasy feeling. Doesn't sound like there's a lot of support for Josh Williamson, but judging by who they have working on these things, most of them did not put out a great effort.
At all.
If you'd like more information on Justice League 75, also known as the Death of the Justice League, I did a full review. There's some things I liked, some things I didn't like. It was an interesting a comic book. I'll say that. Dark Crisis doesn't look exciting, and I think Justice League 75 is a part of that. Definitely check this out if you haven't seen it already.